Urgent, serious. In late February 2026, the United States and Israel strike Iranian targets. Within 48 hours, Iran retaliates by closing the Strait of Hormuz. The tankers carrying the world's most vital energy supply are dead in the water. This chart compares the daily global oil shortfalls of historical crises. The infamous 1973 Arab oil embargo created a shortage of 4.5 million barrels a day. The 2026 Hormuz closure traps 20 million barrels. It is an immediate disruption more than 4 times larger than the worst energy shock of the 20th century. That 20 million barrels represents exactly 1/5 of all the petroleum consumed on Earth every single day. A fifth of the fuel powering cargo ships, delivery trucks, and power plants vanishes overnight. The immediate result hits the global south first. Net importing developing nations are priced out of the energy market entirely. Pakistan implements 4-day work weeks to ration fuel. Bangladesh closes its universities because the government cannot afford the imported energy to keep the lights on. Western nations assumed the transition to electric vehicles and solar power had insulated them from this exact scenario. But strategic petroleum reserves hold only enough to cover a few weeks of the missing flow, and alternative energy simply isn't deployed at the scale needed to run the global economy. Oil remains a highly concentrated geopolitical weapon. To understand how closing a single maritime transit route can hold the global economy hostage today, we have to look at the exact blueprint designed half a century ago by the nations that pull the trigger. The most direct way to wield oil is through deliberate scarcity. The proof of concept for this tactic occurred in October 1973. Egypt and Syria launched a surprise joint attack on Israel. U.S. President Richard Nixon authorized an emergency weapons airlift to assist the Israeli military. Saudi King Faisal had explicitly warned Nixon that supporting Israel would provoke retaliation. Nixon sent the weapons anyway. Look at this line graph. Arab OPEC members cut production by just 5% a month, but because oil demand is highly inelastic, people desperately need it regardless of cost. That small supply drop triggered a massive 400% price spike. The resulting shockwave sent the United States into a severe recession. Gas stations instituted rationing, speed limits were lowered across the entire country, and a broader inflationary spiral gripped the Western world for the rest of the decade. The 1973 embargo established the primary rule of the cartel. By engineering a marginal physical shortage, producing nations can instantly transfer billions of dollars and immense leverage from the importing world directly to themselves. But absolute control over a commodity means you can weaponize abundance just as easily as scarcity. In the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan realized high oil prices were funding the Soviet military. He convinced Saudi Arabia to dramatically increase production. The market flooded, prices plummeted from $20 a barrel down to $5, and the Soviet Union lost the hard currency it desperately needed to maintain its empire. Fast forward to March 2020. Global pandemic lockdowns instantly wiped out a quarter of global oil demand. Exactly at that moment, a production dispute broke out between Saudi Arabia and Russia. Riyadh retaliated by unleashing the floodgates, surging its production to an all-time high of over 12 million barrels a day into a market that no longer needed it. The combination of crushing demand and soaring supply broke the market. For a brief period, U.S. crude futures traded at negative $37 a barrel. Producers were literally paying buyers to take the oil away. The sudden price collapse pushed dozens of American oil companies to the brink of bankruptcy. To save his domestic oil industry and his campaign donors, President Donald Trump intervened. He did the exact opposite of what American presidents normally do. He called the Saudi crown prince and the Russian president and actively brokered a deal to cut global production by nearly 10 million barrels a day, intentionally raising energy prices on American consumers. The ability to crash the market proves a crucial point. True power in global energy doesn't belong to the nation pumping the most oil. It belongs to the nation with the most spare capacity, the ability to instantly dial production up or down to set the price. Since 1945, the leverage of the oil weapon was held in check by a simple geopolitical agreement. President Franklin D. Roosevelt met with the Saudi king and established a trade. The U.S. would provide military protection to the kingdom, and in exchange, America would get secure access to Saudi oil. Look at how this map illustrates the 1974 deal's evolution. Saudi Arabia agreed to price all oil exclusively in U.S. dollars. To buy energy, any nation had to hold American currency. This petrodollar system gave Washington immense structural control over global finance. After exactly 50 years, that specific exclusive arrangement expired on June 9, 2024. Saudi Arabia is no longer bound to price its most valuable assets solely in dollars. It can now sell oil in yuan, euros, or rupees. This shift aligns with hard mathematics. The U.S. shale boom pushed American domestic production to record highs, meaning Washington needs Saudi oil significantly less than it used to. Meanwhile, China has quietly become Riyadh's single largest customer. The cartel's loyalties are shifting from west to east, simply because that is where the buyers are. The petrodollar is eroding, taking a major pillar of American financial dominance with it. But OPEC is trapped by an unavoidable economic paradox. Every time the cartel successfully raises the price of oil, it gives importing nations a massive financial incentive to find a substitute. The 1973 embargo forced Japan to become the world's most energy-efficient economy. The 2008 price spike to $147 a barrel made expensive U.S. shale drilling profitable, turning America into a top producer. And a severe crisis in 2026 will only accelerate the global adoption of electric vehicles and renewable grids. Saudi leadership sees this ceiling approaching. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman launched Vision 2030, a sweeping diversification program to build a post-oil economy. They are currently constructing NEOM, a trillion-dollar futuristic megacity in the desert, designed to run heavily on solar power. Yet the capital required to build that post-oil utopia comes entirely from pumping more oil. Saudi Arabia needs crude prices near $96 a barrel just to balance its government budget and fund these massive diversification projects. Which brings us back to the 2026 conflict in the Strait of Hormuz. A war that removes Iranian oil from the market pushes prices past $100 a barrel, a massive short-term financial windfall for Riyadh. But that same war closes the exact waterway Saudi Arabia uses to export 6 million barrels of its own crude every single day. The oil age will eventually draw to a close. The International Energy Agency projects global demand will peak and permanently decline by the end of the decade. But until that transition is complete, the economic survival of billions of people still depends on the spare capacity controlled by a handful of men and whether they choose to answer the phone.